It's oddly comforting to imagine someone in Iceland nodding off while someone in Brazil is just making breakfast. One cheeky warning: you probably won't make it through this day. Not the one you lived, but the one we're stepping into. Sleep will catch you long before the canoe sets sail. And that's fine. History doesn't mind being unfinished. It's used to it. You wander inland a little and see two men carving the hull of a great canoe. Not the kind that tips over if you breathe too hard, but a double-hulled waka, big enough to carry families, tools, and food across thousands of miles. The ropes binding its beams are made of coconut husk, twisted so tight you wonder if modern duct tape would feel insecure next to them. Here's your historical fact for this section. Polynesian voyagers planned and executed journeys across the Pacific with stunning precision, reaching islands like Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island centuries before Europeans dared cross open seas. These weren't lucky accidents, they were scientific expeditions, just without the lab coats. A cheeky child runs past carrying a carved wooden piglet. Strange, you think, but on some islands, small wooden animals weren't toys, they were charms or ritual objects, carried to honor ancestors or protect travelers. Whether this one's sacred or just part of an early piglet Grand Prix, no one really knows. Someone nearby sings a navigation chant. The rhythm is steady, hypnotic, like waves themselves. Each line remembers a star, a swell, a direction. Imagine Google Maps, but in song form, and the only update needed is your memory. Historians still debate whether these chants were shared openly in villages or kept secret by master navigators. Either way, the sound of the song feels like the sea itself has been translated into words. You stand under the sinking sun, the unfinished canoe beside you, the air turning golden. Everything slows until you feel your own eyelids tugging down. The day stretches on, but for now, you're only asked to drift. Evening slides in almost without notice. The fire crackles near the canoe, and people gather around with food. Breadfruit roasted until its smoky scent seeps into the air. You're handed a piece. It's hot, chewy, and tastes like a distant cousin of potato who never left the tropics. Here's your tonight's historical fact. Polynesian navigators could read swells like sentences. Islands, even those beyond sight, bend waves in patterns that skilled sailors could detect by touch. In the dark, you feel it. One swell quick and sharp, another slower, broader. Together, they tell a story invisible to the eye. Children weave between the fires again, the same ones you saw earlier. The carved piglet has gained a necklace of shells, looking increasingly like it's in the middle of a fashion show. A reminder, objects could shift meaning quickly in Polynesian life, ritual, toy, or symbol, depending on who carried them. As you listen, an elder begins reciting genealogy, names flowing like water. Whole family lines stretching back generations, carried by memory alone. On some islands, these recitations weren't just family pride, they were identity itself, proof of belonging, a way to carry your past even across the ocean. If you lost everything else, you could still name yourself. Historians still debate whether entire households voyaged together or whether small scouting groups went first, sending back word. Either way, the firelight flickers across serious faces and you sense the mix of fear and excitement in planning to leave. The sky emerges overhead, bright, endless, impossibly close. The navigator points to one star that will guide the way east. Another marks the season. You tilt your head, trying to imagine memorizing hundreds of these points of light as if they were street signs. Someone yawns beside you. The fire sinks lower. You realize this sky isn't decoration. It's the map, the calendar, the compass. You close your eyes and feel the swells rocking you. Not on a canoe yet, but already drifting. Morning comes softly with the ocean glowing silver under a pale sky. You wake where you lay in the sand, still hearing the steady roll of waves. The canoe builders are already working, their adzes tapping wood with a rhythm both slow and inevitable. You help push logs into place, not very well to be honest, but no one seems to mind. Sweat beads on your brow and you feel every muscle object. Building a vessel like this takes months, maybe even years depending on the island's resources. Imagine IKEA instructions, but stretched across generations and sung instead of printed. Here's your fact for today. Some Polynesian canoes were over 100 feet long, capable of carrying dozens of people, animals, food, and tools. These weren't little fishing boats, they were floating communities. Nearby, women weave sails from pandanus leaves, their hands moving faster than you can track. Strips of fiber are pressed, folded, tied into mats that will catch the wind like wings. An obscure tidbit drifts in. Some islands believed pandanus leaves had protective powers, woven into mats not just for utility, but as blessings, making the voyage safer. A child wanders by chewing sugarcane, offering you a piece with sticky generosity. It's sweet, refreshing, though you end up with more juice on your chin than in your mouth. The dog you met earlier sniffs at your legs again, unimpressed with your contribution to society. Overhead, the navigator chants softly to himself, rehearsing the stars. His eyes flick between the sky and sea, as if both are speaking at once. Historians still debate how knowledge was passed, whether through formal apprenticeships or more organic, family-based training. Either way, the discipline required was staggering. The canoe takes shape, ropes tighten, beams settle. You step back, squinting. It isn't ready yet, but you can imagine it, rising and cutting across waves, carrying songs, children, pigs, mats, memories. A portable island. The day lengthens, slow and heavy. You realize that history, like the canoe, is built piece by piece, rope by rope, and you, just listening, are already a passenger.
You open your eyes to a medieval morning. The sky is pale, the stones beneath your feet are slick with last night's drizzle, and the town feels unhurried, as though no one has invented the concept of being late yet. You hear a faint hum of voices, the occasional bleating goat, and the rhythmic creak of cartwheels dragging across cobblestones. Then you look down at your shoes. They are not modest, rounded, everyday things. They are elongated, almost comical points, poulaines, the signature footwear of the 14th century. These shoes don't just extend beyond your toes, they stretch far enough that you're pretty sure you could use them to poke your neighbor across the dinner table. In fact, some nobles reportedly wore pairs over 2 feet long. You can feel yours flopping, like unwilling companions with minds of their own. The people around you don't even stare. They're used to this. Fashion here is contagious, irrational, and strangely competitive. A baker walks past with a modest 6-inch pair, while a merchant struts by with nearly a foot of leather curling up like a smug smile. The message is simple. Longer shoes, higher status. You imagine medieval men standing in a tavern, comparing shoe lengths the way modern folks compare phone screens. A church bell groans in the distance, and the sound rolls through the narrow street. You pause, just long enough to feel the air tremble. The townsfolk keep moving, chickens keep squawking, and you realize that life here doesn't revolve around clocks or deadlines. It breathes in bells and seasons. You probably won't make it through this day without tripping, but don't worry, no one else here is walking gracefully either. Before we drift further, if you're enjoying this sleepy stroll through a world where shoes are longer than cents, maybe gently tap the like button. Subscribe if you'd like more of these journeys. And if you're still awake, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, let's walk a little deeper into the story. Section 2. The market greets you with sound before sight. Voices rising, a lute twanging off key, a horse snorting impatiently. Stalls crowd the square, heavy with cloth, onions, herbs, and the unmistakable aroma of fish that looks fresher than you'd prefer. Everywhere you turn, shoes are telling silent stories. The wealthy merchant with his knee-tied poulains seems to float, while a tanner trudges by with practical, stumpy pairs that barely extend at all. This isn't just shoes, it's a social ranking system strapped to your ankles. In fact, England's King Edward IV eventually passed laws restricting shoe length by class. Commoners got 6 inches, nobles 24. Yes, even your toes were subject to royal micromanagement. A scruffy dog trots across the square, pauses, and barks at your shoes as though confused by your choice of weaponized feet. You don't blame it. These aren't shoes for running or working or, let's be honest, living. They're shoes for being seen. Here's something strange. Archaeologists have discovered shoe soles stuffed with moss, perhaps for warmth, perhaps for freshness, or maybe because medieval socks were really just scraps of cloth, and moss was free. Imagine pulling out a tuft of damp greenery from your boot at the end of the day and calling it personal hygiene. A boy nearby drops a clay jug, and it shatters with a sharp crack. Everyone groans, not in anger, but in the way people sigh when the obvious thing happens again. You know the feeling. As the sun edges higher, you notice your shoes casting shadows so long they look like fingers pointing toward the next street. The thought makes you smile faintly. Somehow, walking with these absurd things has slowed your steps into something calm. Historians still debate whether poulains were statements of masculinity, or satire, or simply silly fashion. The truth is, it doesn't matter. What matters is the sound. Tap, scrape, drag. A rhythm you could fall asleep to. You followed the narrow lane away from the market. Timber-framed houses lean overhead like curious old neighbors, their upper floors jutting so close together they nearly touch. Laundry sways on ropes, dripping faintly onto the stones below. A cat stretches on a windowsill, yawns, and doesn't bother with you. Your shoes, meanwhile, are doing their best impression of anchors. Each step feels like you're negotiating a treaty with gravity. And yet, you adapt. Humans always do. Somewhere in your mind, you start to believe maybe these shoes aren't absurd at all. Maybe they're elegant. Maybe they're the medieval version of that one impractical outfit you swore you'd only wear once, but somehow wore again. You pass a churchyard where a group of men mutter about the dangers of fashion. One of them swears the devil himself invented poulains. Another insists they cause moral decay. You don't mention that centuries later, people would say the same about jazz, denim, and TikTok. Some arguments never change. Only the objects do. Here's an odd tidbit. Some illustrations show courtiers with shoe tips so long they curled upward like snail shells, stiffened with whalebone or wire. Imagine trying to dance in those. Then again, you've probably seen modern heels that are just as unkind to balance, so perhaps nothing's new under the sun. The evening light softens, golden and slow. The town exhales. Merchants pack up their wares. Chickens settle. Bells murmur the hour again. You glance down at your feet, those stretched, leather shadows of vanity, and you feel strangely attached to them now. They've carried you across cobblestones, through noise, into quiet. And as the day closes, you realize something. Impracticality is part of being human. People have always chosen beauty or status or sheer silliness over logic. Poulains weren't just shoes. They were proof that even in a world of mud and hunger, someone still thought about style. Your eyes grow heavy with the thought. The rhythm of the street fades into the rhythm of your breath.
You let yourself drift. Because tonight, history is not a lecture. It's just a walk, slow and strange, in shoes too long for sense.
The morning air of Rome hangs heavy, as if the stones themselves are already tired of carrying this empire on their backs. You walk along a basalt street, smooth in some places, cracked in others, with weeds poking through like little rebels no legion ever bothered to crush. Laundry drapes from one insula window to another, white tunics fluttering in the breeze like surrender flags, though no one here has the intention of surrendering, except perhaps to another hot day. Somewhere down the alley, bread ovens glow, mixing their smell with less poetic scents drifting up from the Tiber. And here you are, quietly entering the world of Marcus Aemilius Scaurus, a senator whose greatest legacy isn't law or conquest or even scandal, though Romans loved a scandal, but rather snails. Yes, snails. Gastropods. Creatures whose greatest talents are eating lettuce and making you late for everything. But Scaurus loved them, collected them, imported them like one might today import fine wines or limited edition sneakers. You probably won't make it through this day. Your eyelids are already heavy, but that's all right. History doesn't demand a wakefulness. It only asks you drift along with it. Before we sink too deeply into the shells and soil, a gentle modern aside. If you enjoy this kind of meandering story, do give a like and subscribe. It helps keep this channel alive, much like Romans kept their snails alive in baskets of damp moss. And if you'd be so kind, leave a comment below with your location and local time. Imagine the patchwork of viewers: midnight in Melbourne, dawn in Detroit, siesta in Seville, all nodding along to the tale of one Roman man and his shelled companions. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. Scaurus strides before you, toga draped like a heavy woolen waterfall. He's tall, imposing, the sort of man who could silence a Senate hall, but right now he's distracted by a small wicker basket his slave carries. Inside, a dozen plump snails from Sicily, shells gleaming faintly like polished marble. He pauses at a fountain, leans in, and notices a wild garden snail crossing the wet stone. His eyes widen, as though he's just discovered a new province. The slave sighs. The senator has spotted another specimen. Here's your first major fact. Romans kept snail farms, called cochlearia, where they fattened snails on wine and milk. Imagine a snail diet better than what most laborers could dream of. An obscure tidbit, Pliny the Elder notes that some families bred signature snail varieties, competing in size and taste like ancient luxury brands. Yes, Rome had premium snails. Roman historians still debate whether Scaurus' obsession was seen as noble eccentricity or the subject of whispered jokes at dinner parties. Either way, he didn't care. Snails were his empire. As you step into his villa, water trickling in the atrium fountain, you realize this won't be a story of battlefields or power struggles. It will be slower, quieter, and maybe exactly what you need. The villa opens into a peristyle garden, carefully shaped, a square of nature tamed by geometry. Columns frame patches of green, while a central pool reflects the bright sky. Rosemary and thyme perfume the air, mingling with the sharper scent of damp stone. You settle on a bench as Scaurus approaches a terracotta pot, its soil dark and alive with movement. Inside, African snails, their shells pinkish from the sands of Numidia. Imported, pampered, admired. Scaurus kneels as if before tiny gods, watching them stretch and slide. His concentration is absolute, like a jeweler inspecting emeralds. If he lived today, he would run a very niche Instagram account, Shells of Rome, and somehow make it fashionable. Here's your next historical fact. Romans didn't just collect snails, they ate them with ritual. Special utensils called cochlearia, long, thin spoons, were designed to sweep them neatly from their shells. Rome invented the snail fork before forks even existed. The senator signals for fresh lettuce. A servant hurries over with leaves still wet with dew. The snails gather, jaws working in eerie silence, like miniature banqueters, reenacting the very meals they'll eventually become. You watch, hypnotized. The slower they move, the slower your thoughts tumble. A strange tidbit. Some Romans swore snail slime cured sore throats. Imagine being told at a pharmacy window, just rub this on your neck. You'd probably fake your cough instead. Outside the villa walls, Rome stirs. Children shouting, merchants haggling, oxen groaning under loads. But in here, only the soft lap of water in the fountain, the faint rustle of lettuce, the occasional grunt of approval from Scaurus. Scholars remain unsure. Was Scaurus respected for his peculiar passion or mocked in hushed tones at dinner parties? Either way, he didn't care. Snails were his empire. 3 soft jokes drift through. First, if patience is a virtue, snail collectors qualify for sainthood. Second, these creatures are basically the sloths of the Roman pet world. And third, Rome's motto could have been, conquer the world, but don't forget to pamper your snails. The garden hums with cicadas, and the senator's world shrinks to shells, soil, and lettuce. You feel your mind slowing to their rhythm. The afternoon sun leans west, and the villa glows with gold. Shadows lengthen along mosaic floors, patterns of dolphins and vines coming alive as if they too are swimming lazily into the evening. Scaurus rises, smoothing his toga with the air of a man who knows his reputation and doesn't mind if it includes gastropods. He leads you down a corridor where murals bloom on the walls, Hercules wrestling lions, Bacchus draped in grapes. The irony isn't lost. While myth celebrates strength and revelry, Scaurus celebrates shells. Perhaps that is the quieter victory. Your fact of the hour. Marcus Aemilius Scaurus wasn't just a snail enthusiast. He was also politically powerful, serving as a deal, responsible for games and spectacles. He once staged a gladiatorial display with 150 lions, but still preferred the patient theater of a garden snail farm. Imagine throwing the ancient equivalent of the Super Bowl, then going home to admire a mollusk. An obscure cultural note. Some Roman households kept snails not only in gardens, but also in special jars indoors, so they could be fattened with scraps at arm's length, like a very slimy bread box. Historians still debate whether this was considered extravagance or thrift, or snails the caviar of the day, or the backyard chicken. The sources disagree, and you, frankly, don't mind either way. The shells are pretty. Remember the fountain snail you saw earlier in the street? Its twin seems to have wandered here, climbing the rim of a basin in the corridor. Scaurus pauses, delighted. He gestures for a servant to fetch it gently and place it among his collection. To him, it is another jewel for the treasury. To you, it is a reminder. Rome, at its core, was built not just on legions and laws, but on the human urge to notice small wonders. 3 small ironies arrive. First, the empire that conquered Britain also conquered lettuce. Second, Scaurus's legacy is remembered less for politics than for pets. And third, Rome believed everything belonged in an inventory, even the humble snail. The air cools as evening draws near. Oil lamps are being trimmed, the faint smell of smoke curling through corridors. Scaurus smiles faintly, a rare softness in a man usually weighed by office. He does not smile at the empire's borders, nor at the coin stamped with his lineage, but at the slow, steady crawl of a creature carrying its home on its back. And you, moving at that same pace now, find yourself drifting. The city outside hums, but in here, in the world of shells and silence, time stretches until it hardly matters. The night is quiet, and the screen before you glows softly, like the faintest lantern in an otherwise silent room. You hear nothing but your own breath, steady and even, as if the air itself has decided to relax with you. You're about to wander somewhere far away, into a story where the most exciting thing that happens might be the sound of a giraffe nibbling leaves. Consider yourself warned. You probably won't make it through this day, but that's all right. Falling asleep in history's arms is a noble fate. Before we drift too far, if you enjoy journeys like this one, I gently ask you to like and subscribe. It helps this little channel keep humming along, like an old ceiling fan that never quite stops turning. And if you're awake enough, let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is. That way, we'll know if you're listening at sunrise, at midnight, or somewhere in between. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk slowly into the year 1486. The air heavy and warm. The city of Cairo lies before you, bustling yet strangely hushed in the way old cities often seem when you imagine them. People shuffle through narrow streets lined with mud brick walls and carved wooden balconies. Donkeys clip-clop past, their ears twitching as though annoyed by everything, quite possibly the same expression you wear when your phone pings during a nap. Consider yourself warned. You probably won't make it through this day, but that's all right. Falling asleep in history's arms is a noble fate. Before we drift too far, if you enjoy journeys like this one, I gently ask you to like and subscribe. It helps this little channel keep humming along, like an old ceiling fan that never quite stops turning. And if you're awake enough, let me know in the comments where you are and what time it is. That way, we'll know if you're listening at sunrise, at midnight, or somewhere in between. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk slowly into the year 1486, the air heavy and warm. The city of Cairo lies before you, bustling yet strangely hushed in the way old cities often seem when you imagine them. People shuffle through narrow streets lined with mud brick walls and carved wooden balconies. Donkeys clip-clop past, their ears twitching as though annoyed by everything, quite possibly the same expression you wear when your phone pings during a nap. Somewhere nearby, in the palace of Sultan Al-Ashraf Kite Bey, a quiet wonder arrives. A giraffe. Not just any giraffe, but one sent by Queen Mengiferra of Malindi, on the eastern coast of Africa, where ocean winds slide in with the smell of salt and cinnamon. She has sent this animal across deserts and seas, a gift so spectacular it makes poets lose their composure. The historical fact here is Queen Mengiferra of Malindi indeed sent a giraffe to Cairo in the late 15th century, and it caused a sensation. You imagine the giraffe stepping off a ship, long legs folding and unfolding like a piece of elaborate furniture no one knows how to assemble. People gather, whispering and pointing, trying to decide if this is a camel who went on an ill-advised yoga retreat. There is a subtle breeze carrying dust and spice. You feel your shoulders drop. The giraffe bows its neck, munches on branches brought hastily by handlers. Children tug at their mother's sleeves, trying to catch another glimpse. It's a moment of quiet spectacle, something so simple, yet so profound, a giraffe being a giraffe. And yet you know the deeper story, diplomacy dressed up as wonder. A giraffe is not just a giraffe, it's a statement. It says, Look how far my reach extends. Look at the treasures I can send to you across land and sea. You may not have an Instagram account yet, but gifting a giraffe is as close as 15th century royalty gets to posting a flex. Historians still debate whether the giraffe was chosen because of its rarity, its elegance, or simply because Queen Mangifara's traders happened to have one available at the time. You can picture the council meeting, someone suggesting gold, another suggesting ivory, and then one tired advisor shrugging, well, there's always that giraffe. Here's the obscure tidbit. In Cairo, giraffes had a habit of being paraded through streets at dawn, accompanied by musicians and handlers with sticks. People believed that seeing such a creature first thing in the morning might bring luck. Imagine waking up groggy, stepping into the sun, and, oh yes, there goes a giraffe again, neck like a rolling ladder against the sky. As you walk along the city's edge, you notice how life keeps unfolding around this spectacle. Vendors sell figs and dates, children chase one another, dogs sleep with one eye open. You can almost hear the mutter of a shopkeeper complaining that the giraffe brings traffic to a halt. Some things never change. The giraffe, meanwhile, does not care. It sways gently, tail flicking, calm as if it belongs here. Its spotted hide glows in the sun. You follow it for a while, the crowd thinning until you're left walking alone, the sound of hooves fading into the hum of the city. Remember that street you walked past earlier? The one with the carved balconies? It's back. Now it's quieter, the shadows stretching long. You stand there, imagining the stories told in upper rooms, people leaning over wooden screens to whisper about the wonder they just witnessed. The day winds down. You feel the weight of it, a kind of warm drowsiness settling in. A giraffe has crossed an ocean. Cairo has gasped in delight. And you are still walking, quietly through the evening air. Morning comes again, slowly. You rise into a pale light, hearing the low stir of Cairo as it begins to stretch itself awake. Roosters crow from rooftops, water carriers shuffle with their goatskin bags, and somewhere in the distance you hear a vendor calling out for bread. The smell of flatbread baking drifts through the air, that comforting combination of yeast, fire, and patience. And then there it is again, the giraffe, paraded through the city streets with quiet ceremony, like a visiting celebrity who has no idea it is famous. You fall in step behind the procession, amused by the sight of drummers who keep trying to match their rhythm to the giraffe's slow, loping stride. The result is, well, let's just say it won't top the charts. This animal has traveled hundreds of miles, across ocean swells and burning desert, with handlers feeding it specially chosen branches. And yet it walks calmly now as if it had never known hardship. You notice children laughing, trying to imitate the giraffe's long neck by stretching their arms upward. One nearly falls over, which only makes the laughter louder. You smile too, because you know sometimes the best diplomacy is also the silliest. The historical fact of the day, the arrival of Queen Mangifara's giraffe in Cairo, reminded many Egyptians of an earlier gift from Africa centuries before. When another giraffe had been sent to China during the Ming Dynasty, it was described as a Kalin, a mythical creature, proof to the emperor that his reign was divinely blessed. A giraffe, mistaken for a dragon unicorn. No pressure, of course. Here's the odd tidbit. In Cairo, giraffes had a habit.
The night opens softly in the Andes, like the sky is tucking itself into a quilt of stars. You're standing at the edge of a gorge, the kind of gorge that seems less like a geological feature and more like the earth sighed deeply and cracked open in frustration.
Down below, the Apurimac River churns, though from this height it's less of a roar and more of a polite, muffled grumble. Stretching across the void is something that looks improbable. A bridge, dangling lightly in the wind, woven entirely from grass. Not planks, not stone, not iron. Grass. The same stuff that wilts on your front lawn when you forget to water it for 3 days. Here, however, it's the backbone of empire. The Incas, masters of mountains, built entire networks of these woven suspension bridges called Quetzalcoatl Shaka. They weren't hobbies or tourist gimmicks, they were arteries of an empire that ran on foot. Every year, whole communities gathered to cut fresh ichu grass, twist it into cords, braid those cords into ropes, and finally lash them into a bridge thick enough to hold people, llamas, and sometimes armies. It's hard to complain about assembling IKEA furniture after hearing that. But before we wander across, a gentle note. Welcome, traveler. This is the boring history for sleep, where you'll probably doze off before the first knot is tied. Honestly, you probably won't make it through this day, but that's all right. Please like, subscribe, and if you're still awake, comment with your location and local time. There's something soothing about knowing someone is listening at midnight in Osaka or dawn in Toronto. The villagers here work like clockwork. Men haul thick ropes, women braid finer cords, children giggle as they mimic the motions with weeds. Songs rise and fall across the valley, part prayer, part work chant. One llama sneezes loudly, as though offering commentary, and the children laugh harder. To you, this feels like festival. To them, it's just Tuesday. Historians still debate whether this braiding technique began with the Inca themselves or whether it borrowed from earlier cultures in the Andes. But here, the argument doesn't matter. What matters is the community, the steady weaving of strands, the trust built knot by knot. Each rope is more than material, it's memory. The bridge sways in the night wind. You place a hand on the rough fiber. It smells faintly sweet, like sun-baked straw. One cautious step forward, then another. The bridge groans like an old man rising from a chair, but it holds. Always it holds. Morning slides over the mountains in a pale gold wash, like the sun is politely late but trying not to make a scene. You wake in a village tucked against the slopes, where adobe ovens puff faint smoke and the smell of maize bread drifts in warm, comforting waves. A woman offers you a piece of tanta, fresh and soft, as if carbs have always been the true foundation of civilization. Life begins early here. Women pound maize and stone mortars with a steady rhythm that could put any drummer to shame. Children chase reed toys down narrow lanes. Llamas wander through like bored pedestrians, casting you glances that say, "Yes, I carried this empire's treasures. What have you done lately?" An elder sits beside you, her hands busy with a strand of grass she twists absent-mindedly. She tells you the bridges are sacred. Each strand is touched with care, as though carrying a prayer. They don't wait for the bridges to break. They renew them annually, preemptively, like combing tangles from hair before it mats. It's maintenance as ritual, devotion disguised as infrastructure. Here's today's fact. The Inca Empire had no wheels, no iron, and no written alphabet. Yet it built over 25,000 miles of roads and rope bridges, binding together one of the largest empires on Earth. Messages and goods traveled astonishingly fast, delivered by runners carrying knotted cords called quipu, which recorded information without words. Imagine getting a text delivered by a panting courier waving a string of knots. Before the work resumes, a man chews coca leaves and spits into the canyon. This isn't random. It's an offering to the spirits of the earth and water. You realize no one builds here without asking the land's permission. Try picturing modern contractors ritually spitting on the ground before breaking ground on a strip mall. Somehow the ancient ritual feels more respectful. As the villagers pull another cable across the gorge, the bridge begins to look less like a loose dream and more like a structure. Children copy them, stretching toy bridges between sticks. One girl shows you hers proudly, declaring it will last 1,000 years. You nod gravely, acknowledging that she might be the only true innovator here. Historians still debate whether the design was purely Inca genius or whether it inherited from even older cultures in the Andes. Either way, the bridge grows by the hour, humming with the energy of dozens of hands working as one. And as the day warms, as laughter and sweat mingle, you realize these bridges are less about engineering than belonging. By afternoon, the gorge glows with heat. Shadows shrink, rocks glimmer, and the bridge in progress sways gently in the rising wind. You sit nearby, watching the work stretch across both banks like a loom strung with sunlight. It is not fast work. Each rope is tugged, tested, woven carefully into its place. People laugh, tease, and occasionally sigh with the exaggerated weariness of those who know they'll be doing this all day. Someone hands you a bundle of grass, and after 5 clumsy minutes of twisting, your hands ache. You realize braiding a child's hair is one thing, braiding the backbone of an empire is quite another. The villagers seem amused at your struggle. One man jokes that outsiders always think they can braid until they meet the grass. You smile weakly, flexing sore fingers. Infrastructure, it turns out, is humbling. Here's the fact of the moment. These rope bridges weren't just handy shortcuts. They were crucial lifelines, allowing couriers to run astonishing distances across impossible landscapes. The Incas built roads and bridges that cut straight over mountain ridges and canyons where most of us would say, "No thanks, I'll just stay home." And the system worked. Messages could travel hundreds of miles in just days. It was, in many ways, the ancient version of broadband, just sweatier. The obscure tidbit: before the final knot is tied, villagers once offered guinea pigs, yes, guinea pigs, as ritual sacrifices. Not just pets here, but sacred and nourishing creatures. Archaeologists have found remains near bridge sites, proof that the structure was as spiritual as it was practical. You try not to think about your childhood pet and focus instead on the fact that guinea pigs squeak in surprisingly cheerful tones. The elder reminds you that historians still debate whether these annual rebuildings were always done in exactly the same ritual way or if local variations flourished. The truth has been lost, swaying somewhere between memory and myth. By sunset, the bridge stands complete, thick cables woven into place, anchored to stone abutment. It sways, yes, but with the confidence of something that has stood for centuries and will stand again. The villagers cheer softly, not with fanfare, but with the contentment of finishing something that binds them all together. You step on it once more. The wind curls around you, carrying scents of grass and stone. The river murmurs below, steady and eternal. The bridge holds beneath your weight, humming faintly, as if alive. And in this moment, you understand. The Incas built not just with stone or rope, but with faith, rhythm, and community. The stars appear, sharp and endless. The bridge rocks you gently, like a cradle stretched across the sky. And as your eyes grow heavy, you realize this story is less about walking across a canyon and more about being carried by history, by hands long gone, by the quiet strength of woven grass. Sleep comes easily here. The bridge will hold.
The night is damp, and London is humming faintly like a kettle that never quite boils. You walk down a narrow street, cobblestones glistening in the light of gas lamps. Horse hooves clatter distantly, but here it is quiet, soft, heavy quiet. You reach a townhouse window, curtains drawn back just enough to reveal a room glowing with lamplight. Inside sits a man with spectacles slipping down his nose. His name is Percival Wentworth Smith, solicitor by day, eccentric hobbyist by night. And tonight, as always, he is arranging stamps upon slices of toast. Yes, actual toast. Cold, stiff, golden brown bread used as the canvas for the postage portraits of Queen Victoria. You probably won't make it through this day. Before we settle into the absurd details, a soft reminder. If this strange little world helps you relax, consider liking this channel or subscribing. Perhaps even leave a comment with your location and the time it is as you listen. Imagine people around the world dozing off to the smell of coal smoke and imaginary toast. Now let's ease into tonight's journey.
The room smells faintly of scorched crust and glue. Percival hums a hymn while gently pressing a penny black onto a slice of rye. He believes, sincerely, that toast provides a living foundation for stamps. The porous surface, he insists, grips them better than lifeless paper. Clarissa, his long-suffering wife, disagrees. She believes the hobby is a waste of bread and sanity alike. A mouse scurrying along the skirting board agrees with her wholeheartedly. Historically speaking, the penny black, first issued in 1840, set off a frenzy. People began collecting stamps almost as soon as they appeared. By the 1860s, the craze was dubbed Timbromania. While most collectors stored their stamps neatly in albums, Percival thought albums were soulless. He wanted wheat and crust. Here's your obscure tidbit for the evening. For a brief period, some Victorians experimented with bread as an archival medium. One London society even debated whether stale bread could preserve ink markings better than wood pulp paper. It didn't, of course, but it was the kind of idea one might float in a smoke-filled room after too much sherry. You take in the surroundings. Wallpaper patterned with curling vines, the fire popping softly, a small stack of rye bread leaning ominously close to the lamp. Percival's hands are steady, almost reverent. The Queen's miniature portrait looks faintly embarrassed to be stuck on breakfast food. And you, lulled by the absurdity, feel your eyes growing heavier. Morning comes reluctantly, dripping gray light through lace curtains. You walk outside for a moment. The air smells of damp stone, chimney smoke, and faint horse manure. A factory bell rings in the distance, reminding Londoners that progress never sleeps, except you, who might. When you return, Percival is at the same table, now brushing crumbs from his latest masterpiece. Toast slices lean against each other like fragile monuments. Some bear French stamps, others Bavarian, a few from faraway India. He mutters proudly that his bread-based albums will outlast centuries. Clarissa, pouring tea, mutters that mice will outlast him. One scholarly note: historians still debate whether these toasty collections were widespread or simply eccentric one-offs. Diaries and letters make mention of them, but evidence is crumbly at best. Few slices survived. Archivists, for obvious reasons, prefer less edible formats. You sit in the parlor. The furniture smells of beeswax polish. Clarissa sets down breakfast, porridge, egg, marmalade, and places it beside Percival's toast gallery, the irony thick as jam. He does not notice. His tweezers hover delicately over a penny red. Your obscure tidbit this time. Stale bread was sometimes hung in Victorian homes to absorb bad humors. People believed it soaked out miasma, the invisible stuff thought to cause illness. It didn't, of course, but it does explain why Percival feels oddly righteous about surrounding himself with old crusts. Perhaps he thinks his stamps are safer here, purified of bad air. Remember the mouse from last night? It returns boldly, whiskers twitching. It pauses, as though admiring the arrangement, then disappears under the sofa. Clarissa notices. Percival does not. She sighs again. I suspect she's running out of sighs. Outside, children chant and skip rope, their voices drifting faintly in. A costermonger shouts about apples. Life goes on, unconcerned with philatelic toast. But there's something almost sweet about Percival's dedication. Every empire, every great age seems to have one man determined to impose order on chaos through utterly pointless systems. His just happens to involve rye bread. The fire cracks in the grate. You sip tea. The warmth moves through you slowly.
Everything slows, including your breath, as the morning drifts lazily by. The afternoon passes in a haze of drizzle and faint boredom, the sort of boredom the Victorians were oddly skilled at romanticizing. You wander back into the sitting room where Percival is explaining to an unfortunate guest the scientific superiority of toast. The guest nods politely, eyes darting toward the door like a man searching for escape. Percival gestures proudly at his collection. A slice of sourdough hosting Belgian postmarks, a slice of rye dressed with penny reds, even a burnt corner of crust adorned with a smudge German issue. He calls this one the dark slice, as though it were a profound artistic statement. You resist the urge to applaud. Here is today's proper historical fact. By 1864, stamp catalogs were being printed, listing every known issue by country and year. Collectors traded, bought, and sold with fervor. For many, stamps represented miniature pieces of empire, proof that the world was shrinking into one postal system. For Percival, however, they represented a chance to make breakfast immortal. Your obscure tidbit. Some Victorians believed toast could ward off nightmares if kept under a pillow. A superstition, certainly, but imagine poor Clarissa rolling her eyes as Percival slid slices beneath his side of the bed. Perhaps she dreamt of crumbs. Historians still debate whether Percival truly thought his work would matter, or whether it was simply the soothing ritual of a man avoiding greater anxieties. His law practice was dull, his marriage restrained, his world bustling with changes he couldn't control. Perhaps stamps on toast gave him a universe small enough to master. The mouse reappears once more, climbing brazenly onto a chair. Clarissa swats at it with a broom, muttering about divine punishment. Percival frowns, not because of the mouse, but because she jostled his table. His focus never wavers from the breaded queen portrait. The fire has burned low. You feel the heaviness of the room pressing down, not unpleasant, just inevitable. Rain taps the window, a steady rhythm. Outside, the city stirs with carriages and street vendors, but here time slows, thick as porridge.